Hello, good day everyone. Sir Kevin here again, and this is your Good Governance Social Responsibility lectures. And we're done through the lesson about business and ethics. No? And today we'll be discussing about ethical decision making in a personal and professional context. Now, if you remember in chapter 1, we talk about ethics as an approach to business by a form of practical reasoning. But to tell you honestly, it's not just for practical reasoning, but also accountable decision making. It's not just about a mere reasoning, but also accountable decision making. So how do you make ethical decisions, and what are the steps to consider to tell that we are doing an accountable decisions? So let's get it through. Okay. So we have guidelines in decision making. These are the things that we need to understand whenever we make ethical decisions. No? First is you are able to determine the facts involved. No? So hindi pwedeng decision lang. Then identify ethical issues. May masasagasaan ba? No? Anong mga issues sa masasagasaan at sino ang mga masasagasaan? That's identify the stakeholders. Consider available alternatives. Do you have any ways no, to get it fair? No? Different options, fair and just. Compare and weigh the alternatives. So after you consider alternatives, you compare and weigh them, and you are now able to get and make a ethical decision. So how? So first is you need to determine the facts. First is making an honest effort to understand the situation. To distinguish facts from mere opinion is essential. Ayun, magkaiba ang opinion sa katotohanan. At sometimes your opinion may be the truth and what is right, but please remember this that hindi naman lahat ng sinasabi mo pwedeng tama. At so many contexts pwedeng hindi. So of course, we need to know what is the right thing to do, no? What is right. Okay, so yun nga, according to one television network, ang matalino o mahusay na desisyon ay mula sa tamang impormasyon. You cannot solve a problem without getting through straight through the facts. Ano nangyari? No, so ano ba yung katotohanan? Minsan we get to make decisions out of hearsays, and we get undesirable results because we are not able to verify information first. That's the first thing to do. Second is knowing the facts and carefully reviewing circumstances can go a long way to resolving disagreements at an early stage. So, tingnan mo kung ano nangyayari. No? So, knowing the facts and carefully reviewing them, anong mangyayari pag ganito, anong mangyayari pag ganito. So, it may be a guide for you of what may happen no, at that early stage. No? So, first, you determine the facts. Halimbawa, nag-aaway kayo ng boyfriend o ng girlfriend mo, ano ba yung pinagmulan? First, determine the facts. You should have the basis for determining the problem first. And then next is identify the ethical issues involved. So what are the ethical issues involved? So uh, you check on the reality. No? Second step is in responsible ethical decision making requires the ability to recognize a decision or issue as an ethical decision or ethical issues. So what is right here? Ano ba yung mas tama dito? No? What gone wrong? No? So that's the reality check. It is easy to be led astray by a failure to recognize that there's an ethical component to some decisions. Please remember, the ethical decisions considers the issues and consider the stakeholders. No? So that's what we call, at sometimes we feel because of this normative myopia. In business context, it can be easy to become so involved in the financial aspect of decision that one loses sight of the ethical aspect. So when you make decisions, you get to be focused on the financial aspect at nakakalimutan mo ethical aspects. No? So tulad ng sa marketing, we have that marketing myopia. The normative myopia is when you are focused on one thing. no, you get to uh, lose the sight to other things, and at sometimes ethical considerations are being set aside kapag ganon. So some writers have called this inability to recognize ethical issues as the normative myopia or the short-sightedness about the values. No? Gusto mong kumita pero nakalimutan mo na merong mali sa ginagawa mo. No? So, kadalasan, no, ng mga decisions in ethics, no, nagkakaroon sila ng normative, unethical decisions ay merong normative myopia. So, they haven't considered ethical issues. No? So, next is you identify the stakeholders. You remember in our past lesson, we distinguish what is a stakeholder. So, you need to identify who are those stakeholders that will be affected by the ethical decision making. Now, so stakeholders in the general sense includes all of the groups and individuals affected by a decision or the policy or operations of the firm or individual. No? So again, these are your employees, these are your investors, these are the general public, your stockholders or the owners, also the retailers or your distributors, your suppliers, and everyone inside and outside your organizations that may be affected by your decision making. So, next is you're able to have alternatives on your decision. When you make decisions, not just focus on just one plan, no? One option. No? You are considering different alternatives because, of course, uh, the situations every time the situations permits different alternatives, no, very broad kasi yung mga issues, no, that will give you more alternatives to decide on. So how? So creativity in identifying options is called a moral imaginations, no? Like, minsan ganito, you get to think about it kung ikaw ay nagde-decide. Pag pinili ko to, mawawala ito. No? Please remember this in decision making. I'll be leaving you a Kapampangan quote na gustong-gusto ko when you make decisions. Pag may pinili, may ibili. Pag merong pinili, may bibitawan. Kapampangan, pag ating pinili, ating ibili. No? Pero before you make that decision, be sure it's fair. Be sure it's ethical. No? Responsible decision. No? As part of your moral decision making or the ethical decision making. No? You get to think about it. Ay, baka mapahamak naman o baka mali. O paano naman sila? No? Just like the issues in the pandemic now, no? The question is, kung ako si organization, magle-lay off ba ako ng empleyado? Paano naman to, no? Tatanggalin ko ba yung empleyado, wala nang ang trabaho, wala nang kita, wala silang ma-apply ang trabaho. These are the dilemma. Kaso I need to see the financial perspective as well as an organization. Uy, wala na akong kinikita, no? So you get to think of the moral responsibility and the ethical issues in the decision making. You consider other available alternatives. No? In fact, pinakamabigat na decision ngayong pandemic yon. No? So, after all, you need to compare and weigh the alternatives. When you get to see the alternatives, you are able to make decisions. In fact, you evaluate them. No? So create a mental spreadsheet that evaluates the impact, not just mental spreadsheet, but even you can write it up for you to evaluate what are the consequences. Parang the basic analysis tool is cause and effect. Even in elementary, pinag-aralan yung cause and effect analysis. No? Tayo ngayon, gumagamit tayo ng SWOT, gumagamit tayo ng PESTLE and others. Basic muna. So what will happen if I do this? Huh? Okay? The impact of each alternative, you have the device on each stakeholders you identified. Kaya nga maganda ko isulat mo na sa spreadsheet, no? To tell whether if I decide like this, no, what is the significant effects of this. No? So, after all weighing the alternatives, you should have the decisions. No? Of course, decision making involves a time frame, no? Kasi you won't decide kung walang time frame 'yan, no? So on making a decision, may time frame, tapos you get to decide on a particular period, no, para ma-implement siya, no? Kasi may hinahabol kang objectives, no? So it is time to make decisions. An accountable decision requires an ability to offer justification or reason to support the decision. So the first criteria is it's just. You think about it. Is your decision reasonable? At side story, is it just or fair? No? So in making ethically responsible decisions, one must be prepared to offer reasons to support the decision. So when you pag eto dinicide mo na, you are open with this for discussion, no? You're responsible for the discussion, what for the decisions, what will happen, and you're able to explain, no, the justification, no, or the reasons behind that decision, so as others may understand you, no. Communicate decisions, communicate ideas, no, so as others may be aware. Kadalasan kasi, most common misunderstanding among people are those things na hindi nasasabi, hindi na-explain, no? Kanya nga last lecture I've mentioned that at so many times it's not right to do to think about less talk, less mistakes. At sometimes we commit mistakes because we are not aware of what should have been done, no? What you ought to do, because there's no communication. That's why I always tell many of my students and many of my colleagues that the in ethical decision making, you need to communicate, no? Let's stop, less mistakes. Pag-usapan natin, i-discuss ko sa iyo para maliwanag, no? By then, at least for the part of the decision maker, nagbibigay na nag nakakapagpaliwanag siya, nagbibigay liwanag, shed light uh, to the affected parties of what is happening. So that's the a fair and a just and also an ethical decision. So after you after you make decisions, of course you need to monitor the outcome. Kasi i-implement mo 'yan eh, no? Of course, you're accountable with your decision making. So we have a responsibility to evaluate the implications of our decision, to monitor and learn from the outcome. So what is happening? Is this the right thing to do? So am I late to make a backup plan or to change something on that decision? No? So you monitor that outcome. No? An ethical decision making is a managerial role for operations management students. Um, Making an ethical decision is crucial. There are social circumstances that can make it easier or more difficult to act in accordance with one's own judgment. Minsan nasasabi mo sa sarili mo, kung ako lang, ganito yung ginawa ko. 'Di ba? You tend to hear that from bosses, from superiors, supervisors, no? Immediate people above your organization that uh, kung ako lang, they have different judgment, no, from the organization, because of course there are objectives from the organization. People may understand you if you have that ethical considerations, no? Kailangan kinonsider mo is your moral responsibility. Though walang nagsabi sa libro, walang nagsasabi sa kahit anong policy, but uh, obligasyon natin ang isa't isa, no? In an organization, because the achievement of the goals of the organization ay nakadepende din sa obligasyon ng mga empleyado, no? Dun sa what they ought to do, no? Responsibility for the circumstances that can encourage ethical behavior and discourage unethical behavior falls to the business management and executive team. So the circumstances, no? Okay? So, why do these ethical problems occur in businesses? What we have discussed in business and ethics nung nagdaan. Because uh, an organization, a business enterprise is composed of people. And every people has different personal interest. No? Of course, you need to think of your gain, or you need to think of your interest in that organization. No? For the owner side, is a general thing, no, in nature that they need to think about their investment. Not every time naman, but it's a general thing na i-consider nila dahil yun yung puhunan nila sa negosyo, no? So the personal gain, self-interest, competitive pressure, no? How about the profit or the sales, no? Or about conflict of interest. Please understand, in your organization and management, or organization and management subject, or organizational behavior subject, tandaan natin ang tao iba-iba, no? Iba-iba ng preferences, iba't iba ng perspective, no? But when you decide and when you see for when you base it with a moral obligation and also an accountable decision making, no? Mas konti o baka wala ka ng masagasaan because of that mawawala yung conflict of interest, no? So you get to be at the what you call fence sitter, nasa gitna ka, no? Binabalanse mo yung decision ethically, no? Morally para sa organization and para dun sa mga taong affected, no? Kasi nga an organization is a being that need to survive as well, no? So that's why we have problems occurs in an organization. Okay? So personal gain and a selfish interest. So business sometimes employ people whose personal values are less than desirable, who will put their welfare ahead of others, regardless of the harm to other employees. If you remember what we have discussed in the past, no? Important din yung sinasabi ng ibang tao. No? Important din that you are able to develop yourself, use that as constructive criticism that yun you have a personal growth, no? Remember, it's an organization, and if you put your personal interest in an organization at magkaiba yon sa interest ng organization or that group of people, of course there will be personal conflict or personal interest present in that, no? Magkakaroon kayo ng problema. There are what you call ethical egoists. That refers to a manager or employee who puts his or her own self-interest above all other considerations. You, as an operations manager, future operations manager, and as part of the vision and mission of the school and its core values, no? We want you and encourage you not to be an ethical egoist wherein uh, you put your title above, your position above your decision making, no? So please go what is morally responsible in your decision making, no? What is right as well, no? Even others are not watching, kahit walang nakakakita, no? So but sometimes we get to encounter this that firm's interest versus others' interests. Of course, gusto niya kumita. So, magtatanggal ba ako ng empleyado or titipirin ko yung empleyado ko? Nakadepende yan sa values ng mga decision maker and also the values present in the organization as part of their which is guiding principles. And yun, occurs an individual self-interest conflicts with an acting in the best interest of another when the individual has an obligation to do so. Okay. So, eto tatandaan natin before we end up, no? Virtues or the values and character. What is inside of the person, the character? Ano pinapahalagahan niya? So, you put this intact. Utilitarian means comparing benefits and cost. for the common good, alin ba dito ang mas magandang desisyon? The rights is respecting entitlements. He's the boss. He's the decision maker. So sometimes we get to respect that entitlement. But human rights, on the other hand, is the person entitled to something in a certain way. At the very least, that's the human rights. No? And justice distributing fair shares of benefits and costs are fairly distributed. So you get to go through with this ethical reasoning. Your practical reasoning is based on the values and character, decision makers, values, and the utilitarian approach. That we need to see the benefits. Of course, it's an organization. We need to balance this, the rights, and of course put justice in every decision. So something you think you should think about, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you can able to distinguish this. The difference between stealing and finding a lost item but not returned. Uh, please think about it, and we'll be discussing that in our future sessions. Okay? With that, I thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for other videos about management and marketing. I'm Sir Kevin Asuncion. See you on to the next one. Thank you very much.